Welcome to Parkinson TV. My name is Ray Dorsey. I'm a neurologist at the University of Rochester. The goal of Parkinson TV is to bring educational content to you, whoever you are, wherever you live, whenever you need it. Today's episode is on adaptive equipment and Parkinson's disease. To discuss that, we have an expert panel drawn from all over the world. On my left is Megan Rochford, who's an occupational therapist at New York University and has expertise in caring for people with Parkinson's disease and occupational therapy for the last 13 years. Next to me is John Ondrajak, who is the Dean of Students at Queens College here in New York City. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2015. And on my right, I have one of the co-creators of Parkinson TV, Professor Bas Bloem from the Netherlands, and one of the founders of ParkinsonNet. Thank you very much for all joining. I'm going to start with you, Megan. Can you tell us a little bit about some adaptive equipment that can be used to help people in their home?
Sure. So I think there's a big spectrum of adaptive equipment or assistive devices that can be utilized to look at how individuals perform everyday activities, from getting dressed in the morning to preparing their meals. So I have some items here to show everybody. So if somebody has difficulty, say, managing a shirt with their buttons, there's some adapted shirt here that has buttons on it. However, behind the buttons are magnets. So for individuals with PD, if you, say, have a tremor, instead of having somebody manage the buttons for you, or if you've tried something like a button hook that did not work well, being able to utilize a shirt like this, let me demonstrate, still looks like your traditional button-down shirt. However, there are magnets right behind it, and you can get out the door, no problems.
I need that.
I know. So this is a nice one piece of an adapted device you can speak of. There are also some other items out there. I have here a different type of spoon. It's called a soup spoon, pardon me. So this allows you to, has a wider handle than a traditional spoon, and allows you to kind of like shovel the food in there, and if you look, it's like a little pocket inside to decrease the difficulties with maintaining of your food on the spoon and getting it to your mouth.
Very clever.
Yeah.
John, you've just been recently diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, but I understand that you use some of this adaptive equipment.
Yes, I use a microphone at work, a special mouse. I use my left hand even though I'm right-handed, and I have a stand-up desk. So I can really no longer type. So most of the time I use Dragon, the software, and the microphone to do all of my emails. And if the stack of paper becomes too high for signatures, then I break out the signature stamp.
And what led you to decide to start using some of this equipment?
I wanted to be more effective, or just as effective as I was prior.
And how did you learn about this equipment?
I went to NYU and I had an OT.
Does everyone have access to an occupational therapist?
I think here in New York we're very fortunate that we have so many wonderful medical centers and therapists. I think it depends on your region, and hopefully that's a conversation that you can have with your neurologist when you're there for your clinic appointments. And it's being highlighted that, you know, you might have difficulties with certain activities at home or at work, so that the physician can refer you to the appropriate allied health professional to assist.
Bas, you and your colleagues have probably trained more allied health professionals in Parkinson's disease care than anyone else in the world. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we strongly feel that next to the medication, the so-called non-pharmacological interventions like occupational therapy, but also physiotherapy, dietitians, is critical. But you need to understand Parkinson's disease and the unique needs of people with Parkinson's to do the job well. So people like Megan are worth their weight in gold, because not only do they know about the tools, but it's the tools and the people and the specific condition. So we've trained occupational therapists to learn about the exact needs of people with Parkinson's and how they can be helped.
There's some additional equipment here. John, you want to tell us a little bit more about your experience about using equipment at work? Any barriers?
I have some life hacks. I have a shelf to hold my stuff while I open my door. that's very helpful. Some interesting life hacks that I find cufflinks are easier than buttons. And a Brooks Brothers salesman showed me that if you put those knots, those actual knots in, they're elastic, so you can put them in and then put the shirt on. And British shirts do not have that annoying tiny button, which is very difficult for someone with Parkinson's. I was also going to say that I tell my friends who go to a regular neurologist instead of a Parkinson center or a movement disorder specialist that they're really missing out, because if you go to a center, they have an OT who's trained. The physical therapist is trained to work with somebody with Parkinson's, where your doctor has to refer you to people and often does not refer you to an OT who works with Parkinson's patients.
Any suggestions on what people can do if they can't get to someone like you, Megan?
So I think that, with access to the internet, there's many things that you can find online via Amazon, or even, I know like the National Parkinson's Foundation has on their website some information that's useful for life hacks we could talk about, right? So you can look at your specific area or activity that you're having difficulty with. And a lot of the items that are out here, such as this is a chopper, one-handed, if you're trying to cut vegetables or an onion, if you're making a meal. Something like this can be purchased in, say, a Bed Bath & Beyond. So a lot of the items that you see here out on this table are available in any market or online store.
Can you tell us a little bit more about maybe some of this work
Sure,
for
definitely.
cooking and eating?
Yeah. So here we have a strainer. So for lots of times, if you're making pasta, it's difficult and can potentially be unsafe to try to transport a pot that's hot with boiling water to a sink to be able to drain it. So if you have pasta or vegetables, you can bring your plate over to the stove, dip this in, strain it, and then put it into your plate. So this is one option. I briefly mentioned the chopper. I think this is great. It also eliminates the smell of onion or garlic on your hands, which can be difficult to get rid of. This is actually a can opener that's battery operated that you would hold in your right or left hand, press the button, and then it will open up the can for you. So there are other items also that you can place underneath a can to allow it to stay in one place so it doesn't slide away. Something like Dysum, or we're probably familiar with that waffle type material that we use to line our cabinets. That's something that you can purchase, even in a local pharmacy store. And then over here we have some, switching gears to dressing, shoelaces. These shoelaces are elastic. So if you remove the shoelaces that you have on your sneakers or dress shoes, they do come in different colors, relace them, tie these, they just expand like the elastic on the waist of our pants as we slide our foot in and out. So these are terrific as well. And I understand that the cufflinks, right? There are cufflinks that are elastic as well.
Can I ask Megan a question? Do sometimes my patients tell me that, helpful as they may be, it sometimes increases the stigma. So if you have a spoon like the one that you showed, it's obvious you have a condition and that you're not healthy. Can you tell me a little bit about how people accept all these tools?
Well, I think that's a great point that you brought up. It's important to have a conversation with the individuals that you're working with as a therapist and try, I'm fortunate that we can show items and try them with individuals before, say, taking the next step and seeing how they react and what their acceptance to utilizing it or not utilizing it is. Right, exactly. If I was out at a restaurant and, pulled this out, people would be like, what in the world is that? Yeah, what is this big gray fork that you have there that actually, it looks heavy as well. I think that technology and product design has come a long way. That, for instance, there are utensils out there that I know you were mentioning.
I did a web search for less obtrusive because I had those. I was a participant in a study with that electronic one, and it was great. It wouldn't let me spill, But I can't imagine eating with someone while they, you don't want them staring at you because you're shaking. Now they're staring at you because you've got this crazy silverware. So there is weighted silverware that, people would not notice. It would just, they wouldn't notice at all. So, if you spend a little time on a web search, you can probably find something on Amazon. I know you can because I have. And you don't have to worry about people staring at you. And I mean, the shoelaces are great, but why not just wear loafers? I've given up on shoelaces. I have one pair of shoes with shoelaces.
Go ahead.
Oops, sorry. And I think it's important, we're fortunate that we can try these items with people, so that you're not, say, spending your resources and just purchasing things blindly on the internet. Insurance doesn't pay for any of these items that we have here on the table, so it is an out-of-pocket expense. So when you're, accumulating credit card bills because you're purchasing a lot of these items that maybe have failed, I think it's important with your therapist. And a lot of it is trial and error. What works for one isn't going to work for another. And maybe it's just, well, maybe we need to look at your position, say, at a table, and can, maybe resting your arm on the tabletop and pulling your chair closer, help with controlling your tremor versus looking at this big clunky potential fork that you're going to be using in a restaurant. So,
Vas, you've actually done a lot of study building evidence for these adaptive equipment. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so for a long time, neurologists were, can I say, reluctant to refer people to occupational therapy because there was no scientific evidence. Everybody who's looking at this program is convinced that this is going to work, but you need to prove it. So what we did in the Netherlands is first speak to the Megans of this planet, accumulate all the practical experience and put it down in a guideline. We used the guideline to train a small army of occupational therapists with deep knowledge of the guideline and Parkinson's disease in the Netherlands. And then did a trial where we allocated people and the patients and their spouse as a couple to receive either occupational therapy according to these guidelines or no occupational therapy. And the trial's been published in the Lancet Neurology, which is a leading international journal, showing that independence and the ability to do daily activities was way better for people allocated to occupational therapy, provided these were experts, compared to no occupational therapy. So now there's actually good scientific evidence to underpin the merits of occupational therapy, and that's good news for all the people out there.
And so Bas has trained many therapists in the Netherlands. You can now go, if you're Dutch, you can now go to a website, find a physical therapist, an occupational therapist with expertise in Parkinson's disease right near your home. I understand you're trying to do exactly the same thing here in the United States, bring that to here so that someone who lives in Topeka, Kansas, or Pensacola, Florida, or Bakersfield, California can find someone like Megan, maybe not as good as Megan or as friendly, but someone like Megan who has specific training and expertise in Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, that concept is called ParkinsonNet. Again, it's a limited number of people with deep knowledge of Parkinson's disease who attract a high caseload, see many patients, see all the variations, and using a web-based healthcare finder, Dutch patients can now find these experts. Can I say here on television that you and I will going to collaborate and try and bring ParkinsonNet now also to New York State area, and hopefully that patients here in the United States will also begin to benefit.
John, driving is a big issue in Parkinson's disease. There's a wide literature saying that individuals with Parkinson's disease have impaired driving. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience driving?
I drive every day about an hour to get home and 40 minutes to get to work, depending on traffic, and I have no problem. When I drive with my wife, she's like, would you please put your right hand on the steering wheel? Because I do have a tendency to just drive with my left hand because my right arm is affected. But so far, I've been very, very lucky, and I've maintained my ability to drive.
Megan, driving in Parkinson's disease?
Again, I think it's a case-by-case scenario. There is within the realm of occupational therapy therapists that are certified driving rehab specialists where a physician can refer a patient to in our world, it's the OTs, so that they can do it's a a spectrum of different assessments, both visual, cognitive, and then there is an on-the-road training to see how they do and determine from there whether or not it's safe.
Boss, when's the right time to give up driving?
Well, most of my patients for many, many years continue to drive their car, but research shows that driving can become unsafe, and critically that patients not always realize that their driving has become unsafe. So I recommend early testing. Even when you feel your driving is excellent, it may be less perfect than it used to be. Ask an OT or another expert to independently judge your driving. Good news is it will remain possible for many, many years to come, but ask an independent person to review it early on in the disease.
Anyone want to add anything?
If you live near a major city, maybe get a job that you can take mass transportation to.
I know, I was going to say the same thing. We're so lucky here in New York City. We have buses, we have subways, you know, but, you know, speaking of individuals that, you know, maybe live in Topeka, Kansas, their world might not be as accessible. So that is a huge impact on being able to go to therapy, doctor's appointments, dinner, restaurants, that now you have to rely on your support system and plan your life accordingly. So it can be a very big life-changing event, and I think that we need to keep that in the back of our mind.
It's definitely a fear. I mean, that was one of the things while I was waiting to be diagnosed 2 weeks for an appointment. Am I going to have to find a job in Manhattan and give up my job in Flushing, Queens, so that I don't have to drive and I can take the subway? Like, am I going to now have to start job searching, you know? So thank God I did not.
Well, now I want to take you from your job in Queens to your home. Can you tell us a little bit about things that you've experienced at home, maybe things that you can't do now that you could do in the past?
I have trouble with buttons. That's really possibly, you know, my son has long hair, so putting it in a ponytail can be a bit challenging at times. But it's really mostly with buttons. The small buttons on here and on the collar that give me the most trouble.
How about shaving, bathing?
No, I'm very lucky. I can still do all those things.
So those are big issues for people with Parkinson's disease.
Definitely. I think electric razors are something that can be of great assistance, as well as electric toothbrushes for individuals that might have difficulty with dexterity and some fine motor. And then bathing, you know, there's a lot of items out there that can assist, whether it's something like having a bar to assist you in stepping in and out of a bathtub or a shower for safety, or needing to sit down, but then also thinking about, well, instead of using bar soap, why don't I use liquid soap? And maybe, you know, I can find a mitt or a glove that goes on my hand so I can wash myself. You know, it doesn't always have to be this big, you know, thing that my therapist told me about. Sometimes it's just walking down the aisles of your CVS and maybe picking the brain of, you know, somebody that you've met, waiting for a doctor's appointment or in a support group.
What are other things that people can do in their homes to make their homes safer and more suitable for their condition?
Sure, definitely. I think that a big item to think about is layout of furniture, making sure that there's a clear pathway to and from your furniture. John, you had mentioned that you have a son at home, so, you know, thinking about children and what children leave around their home environment, as well as pets, being aware that items are clutter-free, that there's no extension cords draped across the room, that they stay sort of tight to the walls. And then I think lighting. Lighting plays a big factor in safety and being able to navigate your space. If you're somebody that gets up in the middle of the night to utilize the bathroom 1 or 2 times, well, maybe it's important to have a nightlight on, or one of those sensor lights, as well as, you know, are you potentially placing yourself in harm's way and trying to turn a lamp on? You know, with advances in technology, you can operate many devices from your smartphone or your tablet via Wi-Fi, so that you're not potentially getting caught up in furniture trying to get that lamp over there so you could read. But then also looking at trip hazards, you know, standard home maintenance. Are my stairs, you know, how are they wearing? Have I been living in this home for 20 years and the stairs just need to be repaired, or is this banister a little bit shaky? Again, just typical home maintenance.
An expert, Sarah Zanton at Johns Hopkins, has developed a program called Capable, in which she sends an occupational therapist and a handyman and like $500 to people's homes to adjust their homes to accommodate either aging or, in this case, Parkinson's disease.
And it's, you know, I have found, I do have the capability to go into people's homes, that a fresh set of eyes on the home environment is world-changing, you know, and I also have found that lots of times conversations that might be had in a physician's office don't always line up with, or we might be really opening our eyes to what goes on in the home environment. And I think it really does open up the door to how can we promote, you know, aging in place and staying in your home safely, and having family there as well, because it's a lot of information to be taking in. So I think that having a spouse there, other family members if possible, because I have patients all the time, they tell me, I've been telling my mother this for 10 years, and you walk in the door for 5 minutes and they're singing your praises. And I'm like, well, I'm not a family member, and you know, so it doesn't look as though I'm telling them what to do.
Independent expertise can be really helpful. And the name of that program that's coming out of Johns Hopkins is called Capable, C-A-P-A-B-L-E, and I think it's a great model for the rest of the country. Basa, other things that you wanted to add?
Two things maybe. One is research in the Netherlands has shown that when the occupational therapist goes to the home, recommends adjustments, people nod. If they come back a year later, nothing has happened. For example, they say, remove that loose rug on the floor. They come back a year later, they say, it was a gift from my grandmother. Are you crazy? So you need to follow up the advice. That's one advice. Second thing is, in addition to all the stuff that you said, so the dexterity is one big group. Falls prevention, adjusting the home, is a second big group. I think the third big group is day planning. Many people with Parkinson's find it difficult to organize their day. That relates to the dysfunction in the brain and the lack of dopamine. And I think OTs are, by definition, the experts in helping people plan how to organize their day. When to do shopping, how to do shopping, you know, just a day-to-day planning.
I think that the hardest thing for me and what made my life easier is I'm right-handed, and I sort of had to give up on being right-handed dominant. You know, it's just like I can do things much better with my left hand. So what's the fear of doing that? You know, it's like muscle memory. If somebody knocked over a glass and I went to catch it, you know, for years I would catch it with my right hand. Now I instinctively reach with my left. And there's something psychological about you feel like you've given up, but it just makes your life so much easier.
Well, our viewers have a lot of questions, and John, I'm going to start with you. When do you know it is time to start using adaptive equipment?
I think the minute you struggle with the normal regular keyboard, look into an adaptive keyboard. The minute you have trouble typing, why not use Dragon, you know, the speech program? Now a lot of phones and iPads and such come with a voice-to-speech program. So I think the minute your quality of life starts to suffer, you should consider it. In many jobs, it's considered a reasonable accommodation in the States because of the Americans with Disability Act. So you ask for these things and they're provided for you. Why not? Why struggle?
Megan, I see a keyboard here. You want to?
Yes, sure. So this is an overlay that can go on top of a keyboard that provides the letters and numbers to be bigger. We also have here an adapted mouse that looks like a joystick, so it can be easier to operate versus the clicking. But there's also a lot of built-in features into computers and tablets if you look under the accessibility settings, where you can adjust the speed in which a mouse works, or so that if you press a button on the keyboard, that there's a delay. So if you have a hard time pressing and releasing, say, the letter A, right, we end up with about 50 A's across this screen. Yeah. But if you modify the settings on your computer, you can have it built in, so there is a delay. So you just have the one. But I agree with with tablets and phones, there is a lot that can be done to decrease the difficulty and the frustration. Like, it doesn't need to be that hard. And if you're doing something, whether it's work-related or self-care related, and you're thinking twice about, I'm concerned that I might hurt myself or fall, like, take a step back. And, you know, I know sometimes we're hesitant. We don't want to ask for help, right? We've always done things on our own. But again, it doesn't have to be that way. And quality of life can really be improved, as well as independence.
Yeah, and one addition to the question as to when is the good time to speak to an OT, I really strongly believe in a team approach. So one lesson we learned in the Netherlands is sometimes people are afraid to take medication. So I warmly recommend all the viewers today to also look at our other episode on medication and levodopa and medication phobia. Sometimes people are severely undertreated, and then you might go to see an OT or a physiotherapist, while the logical next step is to increase your medication, and then maybe there's less need for adaptive equipment. So it's always a team approach, and I think the best reason to go and see an OT is people who are otherwise well medicated and still experience difficulties in daily living.
Megan, does everyone with Parkinson's disease need adaptive equipment?
Not necessarily. I think it's very individualized, as we spoke about earlier, and seeing what are your goals and how, you know, open are you to utilizing another device. I've had folks tell me this is just more frustrating and it's not worth it. You know, I might rather have assistance from a spouse to help me put my socks on.
Another viewer asked, what are the latest developments in adaptive equipment?
So I think that some of the latest developments, I know that we, you know, had briefly mentioned about the liftware spoon, the tremor reducing spoon or eliminating. But again, you know, acceptance of that, you know, out in society, I wouldn't want to have to take my spoon out and, you know, click in the battery personally. But I think with technology, there's so much out there that is utilized by everybody in the public. Being able to control your home environment from your smartphone, and I'm walking down the street talking into my phone to send a text message instead of being like this and potentially getting hit by a taxi. So I think that as technology does come along, that hopefully that will drive down prices so that items are, you know, financially easier to obtain and utilize.
John, what's missing, or what would you like most to be able to have?
Thing is, carefully proofread your voice-to-text messages. Otherwise, you will send some things that you did not mean to send.
Sounds very recognizable.
So I think, you know, I think my voice is subtly changing, and I'm constantly retraining my voice software. So I would like to see the software adapt to you instead of you having to read that ridiculous poem every month.
The equipment should meet your needs instead of you meeting the equipment's needs?
Correct.
Boss, what else is in the future?
Well, I think the developments, as Megan was saying, are actually quite fast, and it gives a lot of hope to people. The key development is to have trained experts with the latest knowledge so that people with Parkinson's disease can have access to an occupational therapist with a deep understanding. And again, you know, I'm excited that ParkinsonNet concept with trained OTs like Megan will come to the United States hopefully soon.
Megan, I'm going to give you the last word. Any final thoughts for our viewers on adaptive equipment for Parkinson's disease, or what people can do to help themselves live a fuller and healthier life?
I think that there are many items out there, and I think that as therapists, when we do bring something to the table, sometimes there's a stigma related to it because it can look a little bit hokey. But you know what? There are advances that something like this shirt, you would never know that it is an adapted device, and that we need to take a step back and really collaborate together, because what a therapist might be able to offer might not be what somebody with Parkinson's disease is open to. Or as a therapist, I need to listen to what my patient is reporting and what their needs are so we can work together and come up with the best solution.
Well, Megan, John, Boss, thank you very much. This concludes this episode of Parkinson TV on adaptive equipment and Parkinson's disease. We look forward to your feedback. Let us know what you liked and what you didn't like. Give us some questions and suggest topics for future episodes of Parkinson TV. Thank you very much.